This is BayRadio, where we're leading up to the local elections across Spain on May the 28th and talking to some of the local parties involved. And this time we are back in Xàbia with Podem Xàbia. Now this is, we're talking to Juan Lopez, who is the candidate in the upcoming elections. You're the first on the list, I believe. But going to translate some of it is Bernard, who's also involved with the party. So this is Podemos, basically, the local branch, yeah. Mm-hmm. But in Valenciana, we call it Podem Xàbia.
Podem Xàbia, exactly.
Oh, okay. So relatively new party as far as the whole political landscape goes, but did pretty well, gained some ground, currently in coalition, of course, with the national government, and we'll talk about it at a local level. As far as Xàbia goes, Juan, I've had a look over your CV. Impressive, the sort of things you've done. I mean, a degree in mathematics and computing. You worked as a university teacher as well. And more than 30 years of experience in contracting for regional authorities, so really has been involved in this. But also an external advisor for the World Bank. Now, I know a little about the World Bank, but just tell us how you got involved with that and what it involves.
Yes. El Banco Mundial es una institución que financia proyectos.
The World Bank is an institution that finances development projects in developing countries. In Juan's case, the Republic of Gabon, a French-speaking country on Central Africa's west coast. It was going to computerize its health system. So first the technicians and IT companies of Gabon drew up a project, and the World Bank, in order to guarantee that contracts are drawn up correctly, called in two external consultants to cooperate with the regional authorities and supervise the project. As you said, Juan is mathematician and IT technician and was also responsible for the IT system of the Valencian health authorities for 5 years. So he applied for the job and got it.
So, impressive record as far as that, but it's not all academia. People are always interested, voters are always interested in your personality as well, and maybe the personal side of things. And I can tell by looking at you, estás en muy buena forma, you're a keen sports person. What do you get involved with?
Sí, siempre me ha gustado el deporte.
Yes, I've always loved sports. I started off as a child with swimming, handball, basketball, later on marathons, and now what I like most is triathlon. An uncle of mine used to say that triathlon is the ideal sport for ducks. I have to explain here that in Spanish, being a duck, ser un pato, means being clumsy, because ducks swim, run, and they fly, and they do each of these things not very well compared to other animals, but they do all three of them. So doing sport relaxes me, but it's also a kind of life philosophy, because sport, apart from the health benefits, always puts you in your place. You're never the number one. There's always somebody who is better than you. But nevertheless, you have to be constant and try to surpass yourself. And that is what sport teaches me every day.
I'm always impressed by triathletes, particularly, because that's a tough old game. And that bit there reminds me of the young joke about seals, I think. Seals are faster on land and in water. So if you take one on in the triathlon, you really have to make up time in the cycling part of it. But really interesting. Healthy body, healthy mind, and all that, so it goes hand in hand. Let's bring it back to the political side then, and projects for Xàbia with Podem Xàbia.
Sí, en Podemos Xàbia nuestro lema, el que salimos en el programa, es Xàbia respira, Xàbia vive y Xàbia...
Yes, in Podem Xàbia, our motto is Xàbia breathes, Xàbia lives, and Xàbia works. These are our main objectives. Xàbia breathes refers to the protection of the environment. We just can't go on building ever more tourist flats to have an ever more crowded town in high season. At the same time, important infrastructures are being neglected, like the construction of a stormwater tank or a biomass plant.
Now, this is a thing, it's always a thing in Xàbia particularly, but a lot of the coastal areas, when it does rain heavily, it doesn't drain away very quickly. So this is maybe something touching on here. So can you explain what is a stormwater tank? Why would you build a biomass plant in Xàbia?
Sí, por supuesto. Cada vez que llueve mucho...
Each time it rains a lot, and here in Xàbia it doesn't rain properly very often, but when it does, the rainwater goes down the same drains as the sewage water. And the pumps transporting the water to the sewage plant just can't cope with the huge quantity of water. And the rain water is spilled out together with the sewage water into the river or the sea. You can see the massive overspill tube under the bridge of Via Augusta next to the secondary school. And that's when you get all the wet wipes strewn over the Montañar beach and the Arenal. And the tissues, problem is the tissues are only the visible part of the sewage waters that are spilled out without treatment. So what we have to do is first separate the rainwater from the sewage water to have less quantity of water for the treatment pumps. And second, if these treatment pumps can't deal with the quantity, let the sewage water overflow, not into the river or the sea, but into huge tanks from where, when the sun is out, which in Xàbia isn't after too long, it will be pumped into the sewage treatment plant and cleaned.
Hablando de la depuradora, si me permites...
Claro, adelante.
Otro proyecto que vamos a...
Another project we will put into practice is the tertiary treatment of the wastewater. It cannot be that a leaking pipe that releases treated wastewater into the sea poses a health threat to people who swim in the Arenal, as was the case last summer. The waters which are released into the sea have to be clean enough not to threaten people's health, especially the one of children and the elderly. Also, when the pipe is not broken, I think it's horrible to think that all the excrements are going into the Mediterranean. A tertiary treatment would also make sewage water fit for irrigation, which in my opinion, with increasingly frequent droughts we have, is a must. Here in Xàbia, we can't go on draining the groundwater through private wells for irrigation while we send millions of gallons into the sea. It just doesn't make sense. By the way, José Chulbi and his Socialist Party saw this 8 years ago when, in their election manifesto, they promised this tertiary treatment of wastewaters and also a biomass plant. The problem is, in 8 years of governing on their own in majority, they haven't even started these projects.
All right, so why a biomass plant then?
Una planta de biomasa,
a biomass plant uses garden refuse and other organic waste material to produce electricity and heat, which can be supplied to homes, public buildings or the public swimming pool, which hopefully will be finished soon. But a biomass plant also proceeds this organic material here in Xàbia. At the moment, every day dozens of lorries ship our garden waste to a processing plant somewhere down south, which is the exact opposite of sustainable, and the fire hazard remains. None of us wants to suffer any more fires like the ones when Ramblars was burning for months.
Now, a couple of those issues that we've touched on already, I think, are going to be quite big in the election campaigning coming up, which is underway already. But as far as Podem Xàbia, then, another important strand of your programme is mobility. What are you referring to? What sort of mobility problems are there, and what do you intend to do to resolve them?
Pues sí, nuestro municipio...
Our municipality is very extensive and people live in all its extensions. We have urban centres like the Old Town, the Port, El Arenal and the urbanizations. To move between them, we depend on some transport. In times of high tourism, the streets become impassable, increasing the pollution, the time used in the displacements and the problems of parking. Not forgetting the night transport, especially for the young, very necessary at weekends and on holidays, as well as the connections between neighbouring towns or the access to the train station of Gata, recently put into operation again. We propose to provide buses with shorter routes to complement the current ones, electric vehicles, the remunicipalization of the transport service, night buses to and from nightlife venues, making the service reliable with waiting time indicators, regularity, discount vouchers, establishing a network of electric bicycles, reform and connect existing bike lanes, and even interurban bike lanes. Of course, all this is very difficult to implement in a single legislation term, but the idea is to decongest the streets and achieve a friendly municipality in which to live without exclusively depending on your car.
Now, many of the parties will be making similar promises to these that we've touched on already, and you know people can be very sceptical at times. So, what makes you think that you'll be able to deliver on these?
Por varias razones. En primer lugar,
For several reasons. First, my team is highly qualified. About half of the people in my list have a university degree. Second, we're all professionals or financially independent. None of us depends economically on a seat in the town hall. So we have been working for the past 6 years with the sole motivation of improving the living conditions of the people of Xábia. We have no second intentions. And finally, I personally vouch with my professional experience of 3 decades implementing improvements in public administrations for the success of our electoral pledges, always provided we get a say in the future local government. And that's what we need votes for.
Okay, so along with some of the issues we've touched on already, just the generic question, why should people vote for you and not for any of the other parties?
creo que José Chulbi y su PSOE
I think José Chulbi and his PSOE have proved themselves as completely inefficient. Take their election manifesto from 8 years ago and put a tick on every fulfilled promise. You won't be able to count to 3. And it's not only big projects like the ones we mentioned before. A kiddies playground renovation in Tibiers was tendered in 2020 and is still unfinished. The children have not been able to use it for about 8 months. It's very sad, really, and the renovation of a children's playground doesn't sound too complicated to me. About other parties, Vox is an extreme right-wing xenophobic party. Any foreigner voting for Vox is shooting themselves in the foot. And they have not made a single proposal for improvements for Xábia in the last 4 years. They only appear now to scratch some votes from discontent voters. And the same goes for Ciudadanos for Xábia, gone missing for 4 years and reappearing now. Google for Podem Xàbia or Podem Xàbia, which is the same in Valenciano, and see how many activities, suggestions and proposals we have made in comparison. Next, Compromís, another party, is a Valencian nationalist party. If you want everything in Valenciano and Aust Castellano, vote for them. And finally, there is the Partido Popular. Rosa is a very nice and capable person, but here we have to look at the national level as well as the local ones. Partido Popular on a national level stands for corruption. In the last decade, dozens of corruption scandals involving the Partido Popular have been discovered, and there has never been a serious intent to get rid of the people involved. On a national level, the Partido Popular has sold off public housing to vulture funds, leaving Spain without a real stock of public housing. And here in Xábia, many people have forgotten that the massive construction of tourist flats and the sellout of land for development started with a former PP mayor. Also, in the last elections, I heard Rosa use the term investors, where I would have said speculators. So, in a nutshell, we respect all the people who are running, but we've seen inefficiency in the PSOE not fulfilling their electoral promises, and the Partido Popular causing the problem of overcrowding and constructive speculation, destroying our precious natural environment. And on the other hand, we see electoral opportunism in other parties that during the last years have not exercised a constructive opposition, proposing their solutions with loyalty. We have, and we will put into practice our proposals.
Well, thank you very much for your time. Juan Lopez, who's, as we heard, an external advisor of the World Bank and candidate for Podem Xàbia, so Podemos Xàbia, in the upcoming municipal elections on May the 28th. Presumably there are social media pages people can follow for more information?
Yes, for example, there is the Podem Xàbia website where our election manifesto is on, and also our Telegram group, Podem Xàbia, and others.
Okay, muchísimas gracias.
Gracias, thank you for having us.